This Denver duplex was once home to Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir. She was born in Kyiv, Ukraine, May 3, 1898. Named Golda Mabovich, her father Moishe fled in response to pogroms and expulsion of Jews from the Russian Empire.
It was a very dangerous time to be in the Ukraine, similar to today. There was a lot of violence, there was extreme anti-Semitism, and there were pogroms, government-sanctioned mobs that went through Jewish towns and destroyed homes and businesses and did much, much worse.
Golda's father emigrated to Wisconsin. At age 14, her mother wanted her to marry and not continue her education, which led to Golda running away and buying a train ticket to Denver to live with her sister, Shana Korngold, and her family in this very house. Golda brought her Jewish soul and Ukrainian heritage to Denver, just as millions of refugees have recently been seeking refuge in new places. Lena Fishman, the executive director of the Golda Meir House Museum, shares her stories.
Golda came to Denver to pursue her education. She went to North High School, and this is her class, her classmates, and this is her report card. She did very well. She got all A's except for a C in art. That this is really where Golda claims in her own autobiography that Denver was the place where her real education began.
The Korngolds held intellectual meetings in the evenings at home, where Golda was exposed to debates on Zionism, literature, and women's suffrage. She had begged to be a part of the talks. Still a young teen, she offered to wash teacups at the end of the night just to listen in. In her autobiography, she wrote, "To the extent that my own future convictions were shaped and given form, those talk-filled nights in Denver played a considerable role."
They had met in the Jewish Consumptive Relief Society, many of them who had tuberculosis, and many of them who came with these revolutionist, intellectual type of ideas to debate about unions and socialism and women's rights and Zionism, the dream of a safe place for Jews to be.
In Denver, she met Morris Meyerson and later married him in December 1917. He fell in love with Golda and introduced her to many aspects of cultural life. He took her to concerts in City Park, which are still happening today. After about 2 years, Golda made up with her parents and moved back to Milwaukee to graduate as a valedictorian. She married Morris with a promise to move to Palestine.
When Golda becomes, the Minister of Labor, works for unions for people and maternity leave and all of the things that Golda worked for her whole life, it's because of the conversations she learned here in this little kitchen, in this little house, in our little Denver. This is the International Room, and it really showcases Golda on the world stage.
This young Ukrainian refugee, whose imagination and learning led her to become Israel's first female prime minister.
Golda was a change maker. She really influenced the world in the 20th century. President Nixon was actually a great admirer of Golda's. And she says, "Mr. President, you're sending us the weapons." And he does. It's just...
Many Colorado lawmakers were involved in efforts to save the house from demolition and aid in its restoration.
Congresswoman Pat Schroeder, who many of you know, and she was very influential in trying to save the house. She actually went on the floor of Congress in Washington, D.C., and there's a congressional record of her begging Congress to make this house a historic landmark. In the 90s, Mayor Wellington Webb, Denver's first African-American mayor, helped save this house by declaring it a Denver Historic Landmark,
preserving the place once home to the woman known as Israel's Iron Lady.